Dana on it that's a problem. We'll move it away from the mic a little.
Can I just
I found that.
It's
Yeah, just mute it. If it's not active, just mute it.
It is 8 a.m. Good morning and welcome to a special meeting of the USD 305 Board of Education. My name is Gabe Grant, President of the Board. We want to welcome all of those who are joining us virtually through our live streaming at usd305.com. There is a board packet there if you'd like to follow along with the documents we're going through to approve this morning. Again, usd305.com under About Us and Board of Education. A board packet is there this morning. I'd like to call our meeting to order. If everyone would please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Superintendent Exline, are there any changes to our agenda this morning?
no, there are not. Thank you.
Thank you. No changes to the agenda. I would take a motion to approve as presented.
I move we accept the agenda as presented.
Thanks, Mark. Is there a second?
Eva Doherty, second.
Thank you. It's moved and seconded. Any other discussion? We do have Dana Cosso and Jim Fletcher joining us by phone. So I'll call for a vote of the five of us on the dais and then from Dana and Jim individually. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Jim?
Jim Fletcher, aye.
Dana?
Dana Costo, yes.
Very good. That motion carries 7-0. Moving on to our action agenda, item number 3A, Coronavirus Relief Fund Agreement with Superintendent Exline.
Good morning. I am asking you to approve an agreement for the Coronavirus Relief Fund. Salina County has received over $11 million in coronavirus relief. Some of that money is available to schools to help cover COVID-related expenses. Salina County did adopt a resolution to accept and distribute the funds to school districts in our county. The agreement simply says that we will use the funds as required by law. And in order for us to accept the funds, that agreement has to be approved by our Board of Education.
That document is in the board packet for review and online for review from the public. Any questions from board members? Dana or Jim, questions? If there are none, I would take a motion to approve that agreement.
Mr. President, I move we approve the agreement between USD 305 and the Board of County Commissioners of Salina County as presented.
And a second.
Second.
And I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Jim?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
That motion carries 7-0. Moving on to item 3B, approval of an updated 2020-2021 school year calendar.
Thank you. I want to direct your attention to the calendar in your board packet, and I also have that calendar displayed on the screen. We are recommending that we delay the start of school for both students and staff for the 2021 school year. And I want to explain to you the rationale for why we would make that change. As you know, our staff has been working in small groups to prepare for the fall of 2020 since the end of school last year, and I'm really proud of the efforts that they have put forth. We've been preparing to reopen schools since the last school year ended, but a delay at this time would allow for professional learning for all staff. We've had small groups of teachers working, but we haven't had the opportunity to work with all of our faculty, and we have many faculty who have a direct impact each day on student learning in Salina Public Schools. Our current calendar has only 2 days of professional learning prior to school. Given the likelihood that much of this year will be spent in a hybrid or an off-site model, we really need to have time for teachers to plan for instructional delivery in both of those models. The reopening guidance from Kansas State Department of Education was released on July 15th. Today is July 24th. That is not much time to review a 1,000-page document and to ensure that we have the number of staff members that we have are ready to go to implement the kinds of changes that are being suggested in that document. The guidance included learning competencies and operational guidance for safety. Many of those things we had already been working on since the end of the school year, but there was additional guidance that we want to consider to make sure that our schools are as safe as possible and that we provide the highest quality education that we possibly can for our students. The release on the 15th meant a very tight timeline for planning. Time for staff to collectively review and implement the operations guidance will result in a better academic learning environment for our students, In addition, with the health concerns in our community, we really need to carefully consider that safety guidance and how each teacher will implement that safety guidance in his or her classroom. The governor did issue an executive order on Monday, July 20th, that requires several of the items that were originally guidance to be requirements now. Included in those are temperature checks for anyone entering our buildings, masks for all students, staffs, visitors, and vendors, and hourly hand washing. No-touch thermometers were recently ordered in order for us to be able to do temperature checks of over 7,000 students and over 1,600 staff members on a daily basis prior to them entering the buildings. Knowing that we have some students who are medically fragile or live in homes that have others that have immunocompromised health situations, we added an option for remote learning for students this year. The addition of that option means that the completion of enrollment is critical. Once enrollment is completed, we need time to evaluate staffing and to ensure that we're prepared to meet the needs of both the students who are in our on-site learning model and the students who are signed up to learn remotely. The time between enrollment ending and the beginning of school has always been very tight. But this year, with the addition of that remote option, it makes the additional time even more necessary. So I want to talk just quickly about the changes that are in the calendar so that you're aware of what it is that we're shifting, what we're recommending to you for consideration. The previous start date for staff was August 5th. We are suggesting moving that start date for staff to August 12th. The previous start date for students was August 11th. We are suggesting moving the start date for students to August 31st. Having students start on August 31st provides that first full week of school so that we can set expectations and teachers can meet with all students that first week. One change to winter recess is that students will now be in attendance on the 18th of December if you approve this calendar. What that allows is that we would not have to go to school into June. We wouldn't have to have teachers return after Memorial Day weekend. And so we felt like, let's go ahead and attend on the 18th of December so that we have the end of school prior to Memorial Day. You will also notice that the end of quarters have changed to balance the quarters. When we made the decision to have our secondary schools do their classes by quarter, the length of the quarters and those being balanced became critical. And so as a result, we did have to change the end of quarters. That first half of the year prior to December is shorter than the second half. And so we were not able to end the semester prior to winter break like we've traditionally done. And so you'll notice that the end of the first semester is now in January. January 21st would be the last day with students. And then our teachers would have time to prepare grades on the 22nd. At the end of each quarter, we have a half-day workday as required by our agreement. Our teachers do need time to get grades done. So at the end of the first and third quarter, there is a half-day workday. And then the other half-day will be used for parent-teacher conferences. We know instead of in-service, because we're front-loading all of the in-service at the beginning of the year, but those parent-teacher conference half-days will allow us to have deeper conversations with families where we're really needing to have some conversations about student progress. I'd like to talk a little bit more about how the time will be used at the beginning of the year so that you understand what our teachers will be doing during the time when they have reported that students are not. What we are looking at is a phased reopening. Phase 1 would be August 12th through 17th. And during that time, we would be having professional development with teachers and principals, and they would be working through the guidance document. One of the guidance documents that they would be working through is the document is the next thing on your agenda. Phase 2 would be August 18th through 21st. That would be collaboration time for staff. Teams of teachers would work together for what does this look like for kindergarten, 5th grade, biology, 7th grade science. Phase 3 would be August 24th and 25th. That would be individual work time for staff. It's important that our staff has time to work in each of their classrooms and that they have time to prepare for their individual students. And so there would be 2 days set aside for that. August 26th through 28th, this is different. We would like some time for parent-teacher conferences to occur prior to school starting. One of the challenges is coming off of last spring when we had the continuous learning model. That is what people think of when they think of remote learning now. And we need to make sure that everybody, parents, students, and staff, are on the same page when it comes to what the expectations are for this year. We need to set that trajectory in the right way before we ever come out of the gate with students. And so 3 days for parents and teachers to talk about what is to be expected in each of the learning environments for our on-site students. And then on phase 5, we're recommending that students begin, and we are recommending that students begin in a hybrid learning model. I will explain to you in a few moments how we will determine whether hybrid or on-site or off-site is most appropriate. That is in the guidance document that you have. But in conversation with county health, one of the things that we should consider with what kind of model we should use is the level of COVID in the community. Right now, we have cases in the community. We have what we would consider moderate restrictions with the mask ordinance, and so the recommendation would be to start in a hybrid learning model. Starting on Monday, August 31st, would mean that our teachers would be able to meet 2 days with their A group of students, 2 days with their B group of students, and then a day for that at-home, off-site learning. And so that's the reason we really wanted to start in a full week, was to allow both groups of students to get off to a very strong start with teachers. So with that, I will open for questions, answer any questions that you might have.
Not a question necessarily, just a comment, if I may, and try to avoid the humming. For me, it's really unfortunate at the state level how many political shenanigans and maneuvering have entered into this discussion. So I wish for Salina to avoid that entirely, and I really appreciate the work you and the team have put into creating this calendar with the safety of our students and our collective staff in mind first. For my part, everything you've just said makes perfect sense. It takes into consideration all the safety factors that we know to be relevant at this point in time. It helps our teachers have time to plan for what's the best learning environment for our students, no matter which model students and families might choose. I like it, so I appreciate your work.
Any other questions or comments from Dana or Jim on the phone?
Yep, Fletcher, none.
Thank you.
Dan, I thought so, no.
Okay. Go going back to our agenda packet then, if there are no additional questions, I would take a motion to approve the 2020-2021 updated calendar.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I move that we approve the 2020-2021 calendar as presented.
In a second? And Emma, I have a motion and a second. There's no more discussion. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Jim?
Jim Fletcher, aye.
Dana?
Dana Costo, aye.
That motion carries 7-0. Moving on to action agenda item 3C, USD 305 reopening plan and Connect to Learn guide.
Thank you. You have an extensive document that we are presenting to you as the USD 305 reopening plan. That reopening plan is based on the guidance that the Kansas State Department of Education released in their Navigating Change document on July 15th. Following that release, on July 20th, Governor Kelly did make some of the recommendations in Navigating Change requirements. The document in front of you reflects those changes and those expectations. Since the 15th, a team of educators has been working with that guidance document. We've had teachers working with the guidance document. We've had administrators working with the guidance document to apply that guidance to our district and to our local situation. It's important that we think about what applies to us and how we implement that in our particular environment. The document in front of you outlines how that guidance applies to the 3 learning environments that our students will encounter in our on-site model. I want to review those options with you that families will have as they enroll this year. This information is actually on page 3 of your Connect to Learn reopening plan. The documents that I am sharing will be available on our website and have been designed really as kind of a parent executive summary of what is in our reopening plan. So our goal this year is to provide a flexible, responsive environment that ensures the safety of our students and our staff and our families, and that also ensures that we have a year worth of academic and social emotional growth for all of our students. So our students at enrollment will have 2 options. Option number 1 is the on-site option. I want you to know, and it's outlined in the document on page 3, that the on-site option will actually have 3 learning environments. And we will be moving between those 3 in response to local health conditions. The first is on-site. That would be traditional face-to-face instruction, and we would use that if health restrictions in the community were low. The second is hybrid, and that's a combination of traditional face-to-face instruction and online or off-site learning. We would use hybrid if the health restrictions in the community were moderate. That is the reason that I'm recommending that we begin the school year in a hybrid environment. Right now, health restrictions in the community are moderate, and we have some cases of COVID in the community. The off-site would be used, and that in that online instruction would be provided. You have graciously agreed to have K-12 students issued Chromebooks. That will allow us to do off-site instruction when is needed, and we will be able to maintain learning that is equal to that of that on-site experience. And the off-site, when our students are off-site, they will be documenting learning time as required by the Kansas State Department of Education. The second option that students will have is the remote option. And in the remote option, learning would be supported through online instruction. We will have our own certified teachers actually working with students in that model. And so our families at enrollment will be choosing between on-site or remote. If you would refer to pages 3 and 4 of your document, I want to share with you that we have had many questions about how we would decide whether we are going to be in a on-site environment, whether we are going to be in a hybrid environment, or whether we will be in a off-site environment. And so at the bottom of page 3, it begins defining that for you. What I want you to know is that our recommendation, and if you approve this, this is how we will function. Our recommendation would be that we would use the on-site model when community restrictions for COVID-19 are low. We would look at disease spread as represented by the daily rate of new cases by onset date. And if they were low or steadily declining, the on-site model would be the appropriate model. That is the recommendation that is coming from the Kansas State Department of Education. On the hybrid model, this is on page 3, we would elect to use the hybrid model when community restrictions for COVID-19 are moderate. In the hybrid model, we would be looking to see, is disease spread again represented by the daily rate of new cases by onset date flat? In my conversation with County Health this week, although the cases are kind of bobbling, if you will, up and down, the determination was that really right now, this was a description of what was happening in Salina County. And so that is why I brought the recommendation to you to begin in a hybrid model. The last learning environment is that off-site model. Excuse me. And on the off-site model, what we would be looking that would make us determine that we really needed to be off-site for learning is that community restrictions for COVID-19 are high. This might be a situation where we have a stay-at-home provision in place. It might be a situation where we have significant large group gathering restrictions. If we're told you may only have 10 people in a space, then we would be looking at an off-site model. Again, on that one, what KDHE and KSDE are recommending is that we would look at disease spread over a 4 to 6 week period, and if over a 4 to 6 week period, or if shorter, if seen appropriate by County Health, that we would go ahead and go to an off-site model. So with that, I want to turn your attention to the Connect to Learn reopening plan and just say to you that we've divided that into guidance for elementary, middle school, and high school, and we have color-coded them. We went ahead and divided that so that families that only had elementary students could look at the elementary part that was most applicable to them. You'll notice that much of it is repeating, but you will note that there are significant differences in a few places, and so I'll draw your attention to those. Areas like common spaces, because of how different the common spaces are at an elementary school versus a middle school and a high school. Areas like transitions. The transitions section is different between elementary, middle school, and high school. Most transitions in an elementary school are facilitated by a teacher or are within the classroom. Many of the transitions at our secondary schools are students more independently moving from class to class, and so that guidance is different. And then you'll notice differences in the extra and co-curricular areas. In that area, because we have athletics, because we have many more performing arts opportunities, there is a difference in guidance there as well. So I want to share with you some highlights of the document. This is another sample that will be shared as kind of a parent executive summary. But I do want to speak to several things that are in this document. Much of the guidance document in front of you is safety precautions. Our teachers know how to instruct. They will adapt to teaching in a hybrid model. They will adapt to teaching in that off-site model. But we have significant guidance for how do we keep students and staff safe. We want to have the safest environment possible. So in the classroom section, you'll notice that there's guidance for seating and spreading out seating as much as possible. Our hybrid environment will allow us to do 6 feet social distancing in our classrooms. You'll notice that there is guidance for having seating charts to limit the number of contacts that students have that are in a very close proximity with them for an extended period of time. You'll notice the wording stable groups. And when we use the wording stable groups, what that simply means is that we are trying to limit the crossover between classrooms. So at the elementary level, where at one time we might have had students switch between classes for guided reading groups, small group reading, instead we will do those groups within one classroom to not mix classrooms. And so that's what I mean by stable groups. You keep one group of students together as much as possible. We will not be sharing storage space. We will be, we've ordered many, many partitions, and thank you to Chris Upson and the Maintenance and Operations Department. They have been working really hard to make sure that we have partitions in areas where we can't maintain social distancing, and in many instances in our classrooms where we have tables where students are seated for small group instruction. In addition, we have increased our cleaning procedures. Classrooms will be cleaned and disinfected multiple times a day. In the health and safety portion of the document, you'll notice that masks are required by anyone entering a USD 305 facility, that we are going to do those temperature checks each morning prior to people entering. If someone has a temperature, they will not be allowed to enter the building. Teachers are developing hand washing procedures for their classrooms. In some classrooms we have sinks, in others we do not. And so teachers will be figuring out the best way to do that for their students in their room. And we will also be teaching hand washing to our students, because many times that is a very quick wash, and making sure that they understand how do you really stop the spread of disease. We will be asking parents and staff to do at-home screenings daily. We've developed a document that is based on the Center for Disease Control guidance that will go home to each parent with, here are the things that you need to check prior to your student coming to school. We'll encourage temperature checks at home as well, so that we have fewer kids that we're having to say at the door, you know what, we need to get a hold of a parent and not come in. And we will be providing thermometers to each family, so that if they don't have that we provide that to them, because that will help provide the safest environment possible. On cleaning side, Mr. Upson and his department have been working on cleaning protocols. We have increased cleaning of high touch points. Those will be disinfected hourly. Hand sanitizer available in multiple areas of the building. And then we've done quite a bit of signage in the buildings, floor markers for directions of traffic travel, to limit face-to-face contact in hallways where possible, and also signs out of Jennifer Hemian's office that will help with promoting hygiene practices, limiting the number of people in small areas, just signage. One of the things that I'm noticing when I'm at the store is just the markings on the floor are creating more space between people. Even when people aren't keeping 6 feet, people aren't as close as they used to be. And so those visual cues and reminders, and teaching with our students. On the transportation side, we do contract for our busing. And so we have been working with Durham, and again, Chris Upson has been working with Durham on this. The buses will be sanitized daily, and high-touch areas will be cleaned between routes. We will be assigning seats to students so that we know who is sitting near whom. And we will try to group families, students that are from the same family, together. They already have very close contact, and so where we can do that, we will do that. We'll load the bus from the rear to the front, exit from the front to the rear to avoid passing where possible. The drivers will self-screen before each shift and will wear masks as well as the students who are on the bus. I really appreciate Durham's willingness to partner with us on that. On the food service side, we're getting quite a few questions about that. We are not going to allow visitors for lunch. You'll notice in the document in other areas that it is saying that visitors will be limited to the office area. Again, trying to just limit risk as much as possible, limit new people being introduced to the environment as much as possible. Hand washing required before and after. We are working on some physical barriers in our lunchrooms and our cafeterias to make sure that there is that added barrier between students for safety. Single-use condiments, and of course we will discourage and not allow the sharing of food and utensils. And I do want to make sure everyone knows that food service will continue in any model. But my concern is we do not want to create a food scarcity issue. And Lisa Peters and Lane Norris have been working very hard to make sure that we are providing that stability for our families. And then finally, on the attendance standards, when students are on site, attendance will be recorded by the teacher. When they're off site or when they are remote, they will do a guardian log, and the guardian and student will fill out that log and submit it. The daily attendance requirement is 285 minutes, and that is required by the Kansas State Board of Education. And so the way that we will do that when students are not physically with us is through a log. I also want to just briefly tell you that on the co-curricular, extracurricular side, we have addressed athletics. We've addressed performances with theater, with band, marching band, and concert band, with vocal as well. And we've addressed when an audience or spectators will be allowed and when they will not, and when we'll make that decision on a case-by-case basis. When we're in the hybrid model, we'll make that decision on a case-by-case basis, because part of it will depend on where we're competing, whether it's indoors, outdoors, how many students are involved, and so that will be made on a case-by-case basis in that hybrid environment. And then finally, there are transportation guidance there as well. So the Connect to Learn will be adjusted as guidance from KSDE, KDHE, CDC, and the county health changes. So we'll be looking to the Kansas State Department of Education, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, the Center for Disease Control, and Salina County Health for when we need to adjust. I want you to know that any changes that would be a divergence from board policy would come back to you for approval, because we would certainly want to engage in a conversation with you about any changes of that nature. So at this time, I would answer any questions you might have.
Just I know there's time to work out the details, but on the daily temperature check requirement, do you have any current vision about how to keep lines down to size, how you might handle things on a rainy day, that sort of thing?
Yeah, Mark, to be perfectly honest, that's really a challenge with the number of students that we have. And so the guidance is, and we asked for clarification whether that can be done in a classroom, and the guidance is no. We asked that question very directly yesterday. The superintendents did in our meeting with Dr. Watson, who is the Commissioner of Education. So the screening has to be done prior to entry to the building. And so what we have done is we've ordered those no-touch thermometers, and the plan is that we will figure out a way to have several people at each entry, allow students to use every entry in the building. Principals will try to define who's coming in where to balance that for us, and then we will do the temperature check at that point. But it may be at the high schools that we need 3 people doing that at each door to move the traffic through, because we have, that is a much easier expectation when you have 50 students or 200 students than when we have the 1,100 that we do in our 2 high schools, and even the 400 plus that we have in our elementaries. But I have full faith that our staff will figure that out. They're very resilient and flexible, and so we'll get it in place.
Other questions?
In the first option, where you're making decisions as to change from on-site to hybrid to offset,
Right?
you mentioned, I guess the best way to say, what does low mean, and who is setting that determination of what low is as to whether you stay in on-site, hybrid, or go off-site?
So that would be a decision that would be made in combination with Salina County Health. And so they would be providing the guidance on when is risk low enough in our community that having all students in our classrooms, knowing that we are unable to social distance, we'd be able to have distance between students, but we would not be able to have 6 feet between students in our classrooms. In some classrooms we would, where the class size is very small, but in many of our classrooms we would not. And so we would work with county health to determine at what point do they think that is not, that we don't need to be considering that piece of it. Right now, you know that recently we had a day where we had 33 cases released, and then we had 11, we've been 17, and right now that is being considered kind of moderate. So I don't have an exact number, and to be perfectly honest, we've been asking for very direct criteria, and we've not received that. The best criteria that we've received is what I've presented to you, and because it is such an individual decision is what we are being told, and that we really need to rely on county health. So I do visit with county health very regularly.
Other questions?
Just another quick comment. I realize I run the risk getting on the soapbox too often, so apologize. But I just want to thank everybody in the room here and those that may have been involved and aren't in the room for the work on this. Those in the public, there is a tremendous amount of work in front of us right now to this point. And the frustrating thing about it, I'm sure for all involved, is there's no way to know what's right. I think people are doing the best job they can with the interest of our safety of our students and our staff in mind first and foremost. And again, I just thank you for the work, and I think this is a great document.
I have a comment mainly for the people watching and listening in the community. It seems more and more clear that the more we wear a mask, the less we spread the disease. And so since the mask ordinance just went into effect about a week ago, that effect should serve to lower the numbers. About 2 weeks after that goes into effect. And if we all keep our masks on, we are much more likely to get down to the low restrictions and more likely to get the kids back in the classroom. And they will all be wearing masks as well. So I'm really hoping we can lower the spread in a short time with our masks.
Questions, comments from anyone else? Jim on the phone?
The only thing I would say is I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, reviewed the document. I understand it's going to be a living document. We're going to continue to adjust and do the best we can to provide a safe environment for students and staff.
Dana, any questions?
No questions at this time. I just, again, reiterate what everyone is saying. We appreciate all everyone has done to put the document together. And let's continue to work forward.
This is on our action agenda to approve the Connect to Learn guidance. There's no other questions or comments. I would take a motion to approve that document. Mark?
Mr. President, I move the Board of Education approve the Connect to Learn guidance with the understanding the guidance will be updated in response to changing recommendations from the state of Kansas, Kansas State Department of Education, Salina County Health Department, Kansas Department of Health Environment, and the Center for Disease Control. Any updates that require divergence from the Board of Education policy will be brought to this board for approval.
And a second? I have a motion and a second. If there is no further discussion, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Jim?
Jim Fletcher, yes.
Dana?
Dana Costa, yes.
That motion carries 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just to reiterate everyone else's comments, thank you to all of our teachers, faculty, staff at the district office and at the buildings that have worked tirelessly over the past 2 weeks, digging through thousands of pages of documents from the state, trying to decipher what guidance we could get from them. So that is the end of our action agenda. We're on to item 4, adjournment. I would take a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, I move we adjourn.
In a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Jim?
Jim Fletcher, aye.
Dana?
Dana Costa, aye.
That motion is approved 7-0. Thank you all for attending, and thank you for those attending by streaming online. That is the end of our meeting. Have a great day.